Do you ever feel like time is running out and you're never gonna find the one? We live in a world that values instant gratification and we want everything right now. But the truth is, when it comes to relationships, we need to slow down and trust in God's timing. It's easy to let depression guide our steps and feel like we have to find our spouse in order to start living our life. We put so much pressure on ourselves to find that perfect person that we forget to trust in God's plan. But the reality is, God has a plan for each and every one of us. We need to be patient and to trust that what's meant to be ours will come to us at the right time. It's important to take that time to get to know someone and listen to God's leading. Sometimes God will give us clear steps to take towards finding a partner, but other times He may be telling us to simply have faith and wait. Trusting in God's timing requires patience, but it's worth it in the end. So if you feel like time is running out, remember that God's timing is perfect. Don't let desperation guide your steps, but instead, trust in God's plan and timing. So how do we know when it's time to trust in God's plan and timing? Here are some signs to look out for. 1. If you find yourself trying to figure it out all by yourself. Do you ever find yourself trying to figure out everything on your own? Maybe you feel like you need to know who your future spouse is, or you're trying to control the timing of a relationship to fit your plans. But have you ever stopped to consider that by doing so, you're essentially trying to play God? In Ecclesiastes 3:11, we read that God has made everything beautiful in its own time. But if we're constantly trying to rush things and figure everything out, we're not allowing God to work in His own time and make everything beautiful. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to bake a cake. You can't just throw all the ingredients in the oven and expect a delicious cake to come out. No, you have to follow the recipe and let the cake bake for the right amount of time. In the same way, we need to trust God's recipe for our lives and allow Him to bake our cake to perfection. Instead of trying to play God and figure everything out on our own, we need to trust Him and surrender control. This doesn't mean we can't have goals and plans for our lives, but we need to be open to the ways God may change those plans and guide us in a different direction. So, one important sign that someone was sent to you by God is that you're not trying to figure it out all on your own. You're trusting in God's timing and plan for your life. Remember, He's planted eternity in your heart, but you can't see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. So have faith and trust in Him, and let Him make everything beautiful in its own time. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew God was telling you to do something, but you couldn't quite figure out why? Maybe you were supposed to take a job that seemed like a step down, or pursue a relationship that didn't seem promising. It's in these moments that we have to trust God and obey, even when it doesn't make sense. When you're driving in the dark, you can only see as far as your headlights, but you trust that those headlights will guide you to your destination. In the same way, God may only reveal to you the next step in your journey, even if you can't see the whole path ahead. But if you trust Him and follow His lead, you'll eventually look back and see how each step was necessary for your growth and success. Maybe you'll take that job and realize that it's preparing you for a better opportunity down the road. Maybe you'll take a chance on someone who doesn't seem like your type and find that God has a beautiful plan for your love story all along. So if you find yourself in a situation where you know God is leading you, even if you don't fully understand why, don't be afraid to take that step of faith. Trust that God sees the bigger picture and knows what's best for you, even when it's not immediately clear. And remember, as it says in Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. 2. If you catch yourself rushing God's time. God's timing is always perfect, and if you have any doubts about it, take a good look at your past and your life journey. Think back to your younger days. How did you choose your partners? Were they always the best choice for you? Probably not, or else you'd still be with them. And what about your best friends? Are those people still part of your life? Or did you betray them? Or vice versa? Have you always been faithful to God and trusted in His will and perfect timing? Or have you tried to do things on your own timeline, only to end up disappointed? Take a moment to do some self-reflection and evaluation. It might just help you understand why God's timing in your love life seems a little slow. Maybe you're not quite ready for dating yet, or you still carry some emotional baggage from your past. Maybe the person you're praying for isn't the right one for you, and God's protecting you from heartache. Whatever the reason may be, know that God always has a plan and a purpose for everything. And sometimes His timing is a little slower than we'd like, but it's always perfect. 3. Have some self-evaluation. Ask yourself some important questions to reveal whether your partner is truly the right one for you. Think back to the first time you met your partner. What were your initial thoughts? Consider your partner's future goals. Do they align with yours? Are they even talking about a future together? Or do they only talk about their own aspirations without including you? Pay attention to how your partner treats your loved ones. Do they show respect to those who are important to you? Do they make an effort to hang out with them? Or do they always insist on being alone with you? By asking yourself these questions, you can gain clarity on whether your relationship is truly the real deal. It's important to remember to pursue God's will in the present. Even if you're waiting for a relationship to progress, God has a plan for you outside of that relationship. Embrace where you are right now and trust that God will reveal His will to you if you listen. When you focus on God's will for your life, you'll be a better partner in the future. But if you focus solely on your desires instead of God's will, you'll only experience anxiety and confusion. So put down roots where you are and trust that God has a plan for you. Remember, the best lessons come from walking in the wisdom and will of Christ. Have you ever felt like you're in a waiting game? You know, that feeling of being stuck in a season of life where nothing seems to be happening. It's frustrating, right? And sometimes it's hard to know if you're actually making progress or if you're just spinning your wheels. And what if I told you that this waiting time can actually be transforming you into the best version of yourself? That's right. The waiting period can actually be a tool that God uses to shape you into the person He wants you to be. Now, I know that might sound crazy, but hear me out. When we're in a season of waiting, we tend to focus on the things we don't have. We focus on the job we don't have yet, the relationship we're not in yet, the success we haven't achieved yet, and all of that can make us feel pretty miserable. But what if we shifted our focus? What if, instead of focusing on what we don't have, we focused on the person we want to become? What if we focused on becoming more patient, more kind, more selfless? What if we focused on becoming more like Jesus? You see, when we focus on becoming more like Jesus, we start to see the waiting game in a whole new light. Instead of feeling stuck, we start to see it as an opportunity for growth. We start to see it as a chance to become our best version of ourselves. And here's the thing. When we focus on becoming more like Jesus, we start to see changes in our lives. We start to see ourselves becoming more patient, more kind, more selfless. We start to see ourselves becoming the person God wants us to be. So if you're feeling stuck in a waiting game right now, don't despair. Instead, focus on becoming more like Jesus. Use this time to grow, to learn, to become the very best version of yourself. And before you know it, you'll look back and see just how much you've transformed.